the issue of Islamophobia. We're going to welcome to the Houston Peace and Justice event Mustafaa Carroll. Come on up. Mustafaa is the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Affairs and a longtime activist for civil rights. And we welcome you to the podium. Thank you, sir.
Is it set?
Step out of your way and
Is it ready to go?
it was until I.
There we go.
Well, that's not you though.
That's me.
No, that's just your. You want your slideshow.
Yeah. Okay.
And in that show, and then there you are.
Okay.
Let's see if that works. Does that look good? Would you rather have it in a slideshow?
I want it. Yeah, like that. Right.
You
Is it ready?
Clicker, I think. That's easy.
Which one?
Right is forward.
Okay.
Left is back.
All right. Good afternoon. So glad to be here. I think I'm pressed for time now, but anyway, I want to talk about Islamophobia trends and challenges that we face in the Muslim community. And I think it's something that's faced in all communities. All right, this is not just a Muslim issue, but it affects all of us. But before I get into the meat of the heart of our program, I want to share with you who we are, because I don't know that everyone knows. And I think it's important because what I'm going to talk about is germane to this issue of Islamophobia. And by the way, I don't like that word. I'd rather it be anti-Muslim sentiment or something. Something about Islamophobia just turns me off. All right. But as we said, I'm with the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Houston office, and our mission is to enhance understanding of Islam, encourage dialogue, protect civil liberties, empower American Muslims, and build coalitions that promote justice and mutual understanding. We have 4 major areas of focus: civil rights advocacy, education and outreach, media relations, and political empowerment. We provide sample workshops of understanding civil rights, engaging law enforcement, immigration law, workplace rights, and civic participation, and we actually resolve civil rights cases in our office. This year we've had close to 100 cases. That's averaging more than 1 a week, 2 a week, and most of them I'll talk about in a few minutes. Our outreach and education is 60 to 75% of what we do. We reach out to synagogues, churches, universities, colleges, you name it, wherever there's a request for us to come and speak and educate. And we do a lot of internal education for our own community. Because at least 30% of the Muslims that come to this country are immigrants and recent immigrants. And I say recent, I consider even 20 years a recent immigrant in terms of how they live once they get here. We build coalitions, and HPJC is one of our coalition partners, along with many others. And we frequently will field media requests. We try to be more proactive. This year we actually did some PSAs that showed humanizing PSAs about Muslims living regular lives, etc. And all of this is geared towards creating a more soft environment, as it were, for Muslims who live here in this area. A lot of our work includes political empowerment. One of our signature events is the Texas Muslim Capital Day, and I'll talk about that later in my presentation, but we did that this year. But we frequently reach out to our local representatives on all levels, that is the city level, the state level, and I just got back from D.C. where we were lobbying there for various issues for not only the Muslim community, but we do a lot of things that affect everybody else. And so I will share some of that with you, but I want to get right away to it. And we train people in terms of how to be advocates for your own selves, for your own cause. Excuse me. In this, just in 2013, we actually released our second report on Islamophobia. It's entitled Legislating Fear, Islamophobia and Its Impact in the United States. Our first periodical was done with UC Berkeley. It was entitled Same Hate, Different Target, and that came out in 2011. This is our second one, and we're already upgrading that to come out probably in the next year or so. And so I guess when we start talking about Islamophobia, the elephant in the room is the kind of things that you hear about Muslims. And this is what drives a lot of it, you know, violent, radical extremists, Islamists. I don't even know what that is. And Islamist is not something, that's somebody else's term that came out maybe a couple of years ago. jihadists now. We never heard that term in the Muslim community. It was something people put on us. Now you got jihadis, and I didn't know that was terrorists. Been around a while. Oppressed women, of course, a lot. The poster children for oppressed women is the Muslim community, and many of these other things. Creeping Sharia, I don't even know what that is, but they say we're creeping in here with Sharia law. Most people didn't even know. I don't even hear about it in the Muslim community. I hear more about it with non-Muslims than I ever heard as a Muslim, and I've been a Muslim for a good while. But the question is, why is Islamophobia a problem? Well, one thing, it creates misunderstanding, which leads to fear, which leads to hate, and then ultimately violence. It affects mental health of Muslims. There has been studies done recently about how it impacts the mental health of Muslims, divides and weakens the country and society, so people are all wary of each other, so it keeps us divided, and it increases our discrimination complaints. And right now, this is just a chart of our complaints. 45% of those are employment-related complaints, 25% are government, predominantly law enforcement, FBI, CBP, etc. 15% are in the prisons, where Muslims who are imprisoned are in real precarious situations where they deny their lawful requirements in terms of their religion, i.e. food, i.e. prayer timings, and so forth, denied in the prison. So we generally get a lot of those. And then 15% also covers everything else. That is discrimination in schools, in the public square, etc. So that's pretty much how we did. And we've resolved 73% of those successfully just in phone calls. But it gets really tough trying to resolve civil rights cases in our society. So some of the trends that we're seeing in Greater Houston is employment discrimination complaints, which I've already talked about, bullying of Muslim students by other students and also by teachers. One of the more egregious cases that we had was a teacher who sent a 9th grade young lady a typewritten letter telling her to leave Islam, marry a Christian, et cetera, et cetera. And the father actually came directly to our office to talk about that. We just had a case recently at Foster High School in Lamar ISD where a teacher was actually handing out anti-Islamic materials to high school students. And, they kind of put the blame on CARE for this teacher quitting, but all we did was call them after the parent called us. And we told them what was going on. The principal affirmed it, and then the guy quit, saying that he saw the handwriting on the wall. Another trend, a disturbing trend that we were seeing, we've had at least 3 or 4 cases where postgraduate and doctoral students, namely even a couple of medical students, were trying to be ousted in their last year, one for no good reason. I mean, what did I do? Did I do that? Okay. I just did something else. Let me go back. Okay. There we go. Were trying to be ousted their last year for no good reason. High marks, most were in the tops of their class, and then for no apparent reason, they were trying to be ousted in their last year of medical school or last year doing their doctoral work. Incidents of employees who have converted, having complaints once they converted. One day they can have smoke breaks for 15, 20 minutes, and then the next day they ask to go to prayer, and they got an issue. So those things we're seeing. And then denial of detained and incarcerated Muslims their lawful accommodations. Now, this gets even deeper because in several of the places that we're seeing these issues, it's been in the detention centers where people's status has expired and they arrest them. One case was so egregious that they kept this guy for just having his visa expired. They kept him in prison for 4 years before they deported him. And the guy kept asking, well, why don't you just send me back to where I'm at? And I asked him, I said, well, was it a criminal event or something that happened with it? No, it was just, and we checked the records, it was just that his time was up and he didn't, and it expired, and they put him in jail for 4 years before he was sent back home. So those are just some of the trends. Now, why? The other thing is that we've seen some social media. If you go on social media, we're really losing that battle, that there's a lot of propaganda on social media. This one happened to be from a Houston fire inspector who put, F Islam, F Muslims, F Allah, etc., on his Facebook page, and that caused a big stir. We had another one where one of the teachers in the HISD, a third grade teacher, was actually saying really nasty, ugly stuff on an internet television show. And when we reported it, it got a lot of press. And then the cause of all of this stuff, or the state of Islamophobia, as it were, in this country, is because there is a concerted effort by misinformation experts to defame Islam, who take every incident that happens anywhere in the world and take it to the next level. So right now, this was the report from 2011-2012. We are at, on a scale of 10, we're at a 5.9 in terms of where Islamophobia is. Now, you notice in 2010, we were on 6.4, but guess what was happening in 2010? We had the Ground Zero, so-called Ground Zero mosque going, and people had a lot of angst about that mosque being built. Of course, there's already a mosque in even closer to Ground Zero than that was, but it wasn't even a mosque. It was a community center, and people made a lot of angst about it. And after that, we saw that there was a lot of mosque issues all across the country. If you go through Tennessee, Wisconsin, California, Florida, etc., that people were denying people or wanting to deny folks the right to build a religious center or a masjid in their area. Now, this network that I'm talking about consists of at least 69 groups. 37 of those groups are the inner core. Those are the persons that actually say, those are the groups that actually tell you, give you all the propaganda, and those other 32 groups, they actually support that. They actually send that information out and get it to the grassroots. Now, that group in the last between 2008, they had almost $120 million in revenue. This is how they financed it. We don't spend not even close to that much in combating it, which is an issue that I brought to some of our leaders, that if we're going to be fighting this issue of propaganda and bad information, you're going to have to spend at least as much as the other groups do in terms of getting that information out. It's an Islamophobia megaphone. It begins with the funders. This talks about all the groups that fund it. Then you have the misinformation experts who feed it to the Islamophobia echo chamber, and then that stuff is fed out to the public, and the public gets it. So at this point, I think the popularity of Muslims in this country is like less than 30% popular, or et cetera. So those are some of the challenges that we face. There's also been a targeting of mosques. We had 51 anti-mosque acts recorded during that period. And even here in Houston, we've had a number of mosque attacks. In Arlington, Houston, we had 4 arson attacks, 1 hate sign left after the Boston bombing. Sugar Land was pummeled first with pellets, and the people at the mosque didn't call us until 44 caliber bullets came. But they thought it was just some kids that were just, vandalizing. But then they got more serious bullets that came later. And in Cyprus, there was a mutilated dead pig left just a couple years ago at the door of the mosque, and entrails were placed on the gate. In McKinney, it was pummeled with paintballs. In Victoria, you had hate graffiti for a community that had been there for 30 or 40 years. And most of these communities, most of the places that these things have happened are not recent mosques. They're just mosques that have been there for a number of years. And so now people, you're starting to see the result of some of the hateful rhetoric. At Texas Muslim Capital Day, one of our signature events, we also experienced a similar incident. Before we even gotten there, there was lots, and this is just one example of hate graffiti, hate information that goes on the website. Here's one that is particularly disturbing. Heads up all infidels, especially the Texan variety. There will be 3 target-rich environments in Texas on January 29th. Now, the target-rich environment that they were talking about was 650 attendees to our Texas Muslim Capital Day. Approximately 80 to 90% of those were middle school and high school students. But people didn't care. And we also had one of our esteemed representative, Ms. White, asked us if we visit her office to pledge allegiance and denounce terrorism. And so that was, and the good thing about that is that we didn't say a word about it. We didn't complain. We didn't do anything. People other than Muslims started a Facebook page about bigotry against Molly White. And so that was the effect of us having relationships with other folks, and it really helped us a lot. The anti-Muslim hate continued during the opening ceremonies. This lady took the mic and started saying a lot of crazy stuff. We got a lot of press coverage on that. And even through all of that, we had 6 schoolgirls singing the national anthem, and they continued to shout and tell people to go back to where they come from and all kind of other things that go along with it. So these are just examples, and I tell people a lot of times when they ask just how bad is it for Muslims, I say, well, if you compare it to what happened back in the 60s with African Americans, it doesn't even light a candle. But it's actually starting the type of environment that is we're starting to see some traction in terms of the violence, in terms of other things that's happening with people at jobs and in the public square, et cetera. As a result of that day, we got a lot of apologies from different persons. This one came from Senator Rodriguez. We got emails and so many letters. Some came with money, which I think I'd invite those people back to yell at our next event, because if it's going to be a good fundraiser, then they helped us. But it wasn't that much money, but it was just to show their disdain for what had happened. We got, here's one from Baltimore. We got emails and letters from all over the state and all over the country as a result of that. And ultimately, we got invited back to Austin with the children so that they could have a better reception than what they got at the first Capitol Day event. So how does this work? Well, when you talk about legislating fear, there's ALAC, American Laws for American Courts. Its author and the guy that's most famous for it is David Yerushalmi. David Yerushalmi is a lawyer in New York who actually did the template for the anti-foreign law legislation that people are all up in angst about. They call it anti-foreign law, but actually it's a code for anti-Sharia. As I said before, most of the people don't even know what Sharia is. They think it's heads and hands getting chopped off and women getting beat up, and they think that's all part of it. We consider those criminal acts, but they've gotten their ire up, and this is the guy that actually initiated. And then he pushes all that down to Act for America and the Eagle Forum. And then the legislatures, and we're still fighting that this year. We fought it for the last, I guess, since 2007. I'm aware that these anti-Sharia, anti-foreign law bills have been formulated. Now, at first it was anti-Sharia, and because Sharia is religious, our counterparts in Oklahoma actually filed suit against the state of Oklahoma when they passed that law up there, and it was retracted, and the federal judge threw it out because it's against your First Amendment right. But they changed the wording to anti-foreign law, and when I visited one of the representative's office, I asked, well, what country are you talking about? Is it Peru? Is it Canada? What country are you talking about? And they just were like a deer in the headlights, didn't know what to say. Because it's not about a country, it's about a religion. And their perception is that the Muslims are coming and they're bringing Sharia law and so forth and so on. And obviously most of these people, including our elected representatives, don't know the Constitution of this great country. So nevertheless, this is some of the result of it. And that's a picture of David Yerushalmi there. And some of the statistics about what party and who introduced it. 78 bills in 29 states during that period, but we've had even more now introduced. And, states like Idaho was considering one. I mean, you don't even have Muslims up there. What are the Muslims that's bringing Sharia law to Idaho and Montana? You got people in areas where there are no Muslims writing the bill that they're going to bring Sharia, and we got to write something against it, where the Constitution is clear. The First Amendment says there'll be no state-mandated religion. And yet people are saying, well, we just want to make it clear. Like, that's not clear enough. So it's always tickles me about some of the things, but it's not funny in the sense that it's starting to gain some traction. We fought this in 2013 with, we testified, and this particular senator actually moved it from the Jurisprudence Committee to the Commerce Committee, which handles none of that stuff. But because he thought he had a better chance, and he did, of getting it through committee, he moved it to Commerce Committee, and they even made jokes about it. But nevertheless, we followed it. We actually went to Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst during that time, too, once it left committee, and they never got to the floor. This year, there were three more bills introduced. One of them is still out there, still going to be voted on, and that's the one by Leach, and they relates to family matters. They felt the need to protect women. All right, so these bills, even though it may sound comical, it's very serious in the sense that it paints a cloud. It's not so much that they have a lot of traction. It's not so much that they make any sense or make any difference, but they actually paint a picture of a nefarious community that many believe are a fifth column in the United States, trying to subvert the Constitution and the government. And so these people are continuing to pass this type of legislation, or continuing to press it. And when I went there, it was amazing to see the people that were there. Just regular folks, but scared to death of Muslims, and most of them live in places where they don't even have a Muslim. So that always amazes me, but, that's our history. So these are the bills. We've talked about that already. But here's the ultimate impact of Islamophobia, and this is not funny, because this guy was he was a ADP salesman, the security systems for homes, and he was in a home here in Houston, was in a home selling it, writing up the contract. The guy asked him, where is he from? He told him. He said, what kind of name is that you got? His name is Yaqub. He said it's a Muslim name. And while he's writing it, this guy jumps on him and starts to beat him up unmercifully. He bit off part of his ear, broke several ribs. The guy's own family had to call the police to get him off of this man. And the police came and tased him 3 times and couldn't get him off of him. And, the kind of rage you see that this gentleman was subject to is something that people would do if you hurt one of their children or something. But to go from ground zero to that, and have that type of rage against an innocent person is not doing anything but his job. It was kind of, and we have several other cases like that. And, some of the more egregious things that we've seen is that our brothers, our Sikh brothers, who wear turbans all the time, are often confused as Muslims. And just a few years ago in Wisconsin, they killed 6 Sikhs. A guy walked in from one of those hate groups or right-wing groups and just started shooting folks and killed, I think it was 6 persons. So even though, we can laugh and joke about some of the things, but ignorance is a cost for us in terms of what this really does. So what is it that we can do about it? Well, first of all, we need to continue to coalesce. We need to continue to build coalitions and to reach across various boundaries, not just, I'm excited to find out that this conference here had not just people on the left, but people on the right, or there was at least an attempt to do that, so that we promote justice and mutual understanding. We joined at least 6 coalitions within the last year. The CRC, which HPJC is a big part of, Civil Rights Coalition, is one of those coalitions that actually we work together with several other groups, advocacy groups. We need to be patient and reasonable. This is something that I tell our Muslim community, and they are patient and for the most part reasonable, but we need to continue to be patient and reasonable. We need to be active in political life. One of the things that's got to change is the political landscape in this state. All of us have been protesting and rallying and doing vigils and all that, but none of that's going to change until the grassroots community say, okay, that's enough, and we're going to vote these rascals out. If they're going to continue to pit people against each other and continue to write bills against our communities, then it's time for us to take serious action in terms of political action, because it's not going to change until that changes. We need to empower our community through civic engagement. One of the things that we constantly do and that we pledged to do this year was to spend a lot of time working within our community, because that is where the battle needs to be won. We've done all the protesting. I'm tired of buying new shoes. I have to go out marching and this type of stuff. We need to get people politically engaged. reach across ethnic, political, and religious boundaries to find commonality, and then provide alternatives to fear, work together for the common good. We initiated some work where we actually do, anytime you're feeding the homeless or you have other projects, helping the poor and the shut-in, the sick and the shut-in, those types of things actually help us to understand. Case in point, we had a Clean Houston project that we were doing last year, and we worked with a mixed group of people from various backgrounds, and there was one gentleman there and says, before I worked with you all, he said, I hated Muslims. I didn't know anything about them, and I didn't like them, etc. But he said, after that, and that was just something simple. He said, after that, you all changed my mind. And what did we do? Cut grass and clean up an area. That was it. So it does mean something for us to work together. Build strong internal relationships, invest time, money, and energy into community development, reintroduce ourselves. As Muslims, we constantly are reintroducing ourselves, promote volunteerism, and then leverage our diversity for mutual benefit. Those are just a few of the things that I think would help us win this war and bring us together as a society. If we're going to fight any kind of problem, then we have to do it together. It cannot just be done by one group, and it cannot look like the Muslims against this group, etc. It needs to be people of right minds who believe in fairness and equity and equality that fight together and work together for the common good. So I hope that, I know this was a little pressed for time, I hope that we've shared some information with you that can be beneficial. I'm really honored to be here and thankful that you all had this conference. I really do want to see peace before I die. Peace, or not this eternal war thing. So thank you very much.
Some questions came in, and you're going to have to corral Mustafaa, and there are some very good questions people wanted to ask you. And we need to look at all these issues in greater detail.